Hear us?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
All right. Are we ready?
go.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the first WAG of 2026. And we're kicking off a new term. Grateful to the mayor and the city council for approving another 2-year term for the SWAG. My name is Andrea Amico. I'm the co-chair of the SWAG with Al Pratt from the city of Portsmouth. And so we usually start our meetings with just a brief welcome. We do an introduction of everyone that's in the room, just for purposes of minutes. And then we also have to approve our minutes from the last meeting. So before we go ahead and approve the minutes, I wanted to take some time to do introductions. And we do have new members with us. So I want to just, if everyone could just spend other than just your name, if you could just spend a little bit of time explaining who you are, why you're on the SWAG, and maybe what your background is. So I'll kick it off. My name's Andrea Amico. I'm a Portsmouth resident, and I co-chair the SWAG and helped to form this group back in 2020 when I realized that we needed a platform to be able to talk about evolving water issues, particularly around PFAS, but certainly there's lots of issues here in the city and in the SWAG that we address. And I really came to be passionate about the issue of water quality and safety because my family was affected by PFAS at the Peace Trade Port. My husband worked for a company there, and 2 of my children drink contaminated water. And so it really sparked a fire inside of me to advocate for health studies and blood testing and water filtration. And it has led to almost 12 years of work towards trying to just advocate for clean water and to bring action and answer to people who are impacted at Peace. So that's a little bit about me. I will pass it this way.
My name is Michelle Flynn. I'm the one of the representatives from the City Council here on the committee, so new to this. And I've lived in Portsmouth my whole life, and I think, I keep thinking as we talk through all these issues around about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and water is at the foundation of that. And so I'm happy to serve, and I'm very curious. And I was able to spend time with Al and some folks from DPW learning about the whole arc of water here in the community. And I know this is one specific niche that Andrea has poured her heart into, and I'm grateful. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and meet everybody.
I'm Katri Hillman, and I am one of the citizen or resident members here, but I do have an environmental background, and I've been working in the water world for several years. And as a side, I manage what's called the Great Bay Changemaker program. And actually, Andrea has participated in our program as a learner and facilitator over the past couple of years. So that's the reason why I'm here. I've been in Portsmouth for 18 years. And yeah, that's it.
Bill McQuillan, I'm the fire chief and a resident here in Portsmouth. Back when the SWAG was formed in 2020, there was some discussion as to the representation on the board, and it was felt that there needed to be some of the firefighters who worked out at Fire Station 3 at Pease who were exposed to the PFAS. And as such, I've been appointed and been here for a little while.
I'm Rich DiPantima, a Portsmouth resident for the last 27 years. Retired state, I'm an epidemiologist, retired epidemiologist, former state rep, also a victim of PFAS contamination, having spent active duty at Pease and also 12 years with the National Guard at Pease. Looking forward to another year on the SWAG, and the former chair of the CAP, the Community Advisory Panel that we had here regarding PFAS at Pease for a number of years.
My name is Dan Finan. I'm a Portsmouth resident. Went to school here, left, but then came back. I've been back for 20 something years now, so testament to my age. I'm an environmental engineer, and I work in the water and wastewater industry. So I just had kind of an interest in getting involved in the community, and I was aware of the group. So when I saw the opening, I thought I'd throw my hat in.
Hi, I'm Mariah Habershaw. I work for the city of Portsmouth as the water quality specialist. I handle monitoring pre, during, and post-treatment for the water treatment facility, for Pease and Portsmouth.
Mason Caceres, I'm the Assistant Water Resource Manager for the City of Portsmouth. Been here about 7 years now, still going strong. And I've been a part of the SWAG, I think, for the past 2 years, I want to say, just about that. Lots to talk about in regards to water quality and everything that we do for the city. It's important work.
I'm Al Pratt. I'm the resource director for the city. I have been working here for just over 11 years now. Time flies, it's crazy. But 11 years here. Prior to that, I worked for environmental and civil engineering consulting firms. AECOM was one of them. And so before that, Atlantic Geoscience before that, did a lot of hydrogeology work. I'm a licensed professional engineer, a grade 4 water treatment operator. And going way back after I graduated from UNH, time ago, I won't even say when. I went to work for the EPA for 5 years and got a lot of good background there for environmental issues and water quality monitoring type of work. So I've been doing this for a long time and did a wide variety of projects over my life.
All right, looks like we have 2 SWAG members online too. So Kim, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Sure, I'm Kim McNamara. I'm the director of the Portsmouth Health Department. I've been with the city of Portsmouth for 21 years, and I'm proud to say 5 years prior to that, Rich DiPentima was my boss at the Manchester Health Department. And public and environmental health are my passion. I have a master's in environmental health, environmental science and policy from Johns Hopkins, and that was really eye-opening. And so I'm very happy to serve on this board and hope that we can do better in the future than we've done in the past.
Thanks, Kim. Laurel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Laurel Shader. I'm a senior scientist at, my camera's doing something weird. I'm Laurel Shader. I'm a senior scientist at Silent Spring Institute based in Newton, Massachusetts. Actually an environmental engineer by training as well, but I'm now a public health researcher. Silent Spring focuses on everyday chemical exposures and women's health with a focus on breast cancer prevention. I've been studying PFAS in water since 2009 and have been involved with the Pease community since 2015 through Andrea and the Testing for Pease group. And I'm also a technical advisor to the Pease CAB and one of the multi-site study PIs representing Massachusetts here. So happy to continue being a part of this group.
Great. Thank you so much. So welcome, everybody, former members as well as new members. Thank you so much. Maybe we can take a moment and have folks in the audience introduce themselves. Shan, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Shan Ziedema. I'm a research assistant professor at UNH in the poorly named Water Systems Analysis Group. Really missed the opportunity for a good acronym there. I study, I'm a hydrologist by training. I study people's interactions with watersheds very broadly.
Thank you.
Genevieve Vaxenlatsky. I'm a Portsmouth resident, caring mom. I have my daughter here who is interested in finding out what you find people do here throughout the year. So I will pass it to her.
Muskie. I guess I live here too, and I'm a freshman high school student here. My name is Sophia Amico, and I came here today because Miss Amico gave a talk at our school, and I thought that what she had to say was very interesting, and I wanted to learn more about what you guys do here.
Yeah, for some context, Mason, Elle, and I presented to the freshmen at Portsmouth High School a few months ago, and we inspired some people and they had some interest in the work that we do, and welcome. Thank you for coming. Okay, great. I think the next thing that we need to do is approve our minutes from the December meeting. And so I believe too, that's only the people that were in that meeting can approve those minutes, if I'm correct, right, Al? Because I know we have some new members that weren't here. So I did circulate a draft of those minutes, and I would just need a motion to approve the December 2025 SWAG meeting minutes.
Motion.
Okay, Rich DiPentima is making a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. And everyone who attended the December 2025 SWAG meeting, are you in favor of approving those minutes?
Yes.
And is there anyone opposed to those minutes? Okay, we will go ahead and approve those minutes from our December 2025 meeting. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Al, who's gonna talk a little bit about mission update, which we talked a lot about in last year.
We have a lot over here, so a lot of these items here. So yeah, mission update. So I thought this was a good opportunity to talk about our mission now that it was proposed, this change mission was proposed to the mayor as part of the re-upping of this group. This was accepted as part of that. So want to review this with everybody and keeping this in mind as we move forward for topics that we want to cover in the future. So there's three sort of parts of this. I broke up one paragraph into the three different sentences. The first part of this really is the original scope of work basically that we were going to have, really keeping track of PFAS legislation, health effects, because back in 2020, there's things moving very quickly, rules were changing, and we wanted to have this group to be able to keep up with that and be able to inform the council of what was happening. So that's sort of, and it's still changing. Regulations are still changing. We're still need to keep up with this. So that is sort of the initial part of this. The second is sort of what we've evolved into more of discussing all the different aspects of the water supply system. There's so much we can talk about related to water quantity and water quality. They've kind of fallen into sort of routine topics that we bring up every meeting. And it's something that, you know, as anyone has interest to learn more about what we do, it sort of falls into this, and we're glad to delve into that more. This venue is very, very important for us to be able to sort of first step in outreach. You know, what we can talk about all the things that we're doing. This is a way to get it to all of you, way to get it to the counselors to share in that direction. And the third sort of aspect of this is sort of the SWAG outreach. What can the SWAG do to get this message out to the greater public and bring up topics? We've had a water forum a couple, 2-3 years ago, but it's something what we might want to look more at in this next 2 years of what can we do to educate the public a little bit more and outreach. There's only so much that we can do in the water department. It's better to have a bigger group, counselors, everyone, community members involved in that sort of outreach to get the word out. So I see that sort of as that third piece that to think about in our overall mission. So as we think of new topics to discuss, and I'm always open to more, we revisit some as we go around, but definitely want to get your input on things that we haven't covered, things that we want to get into more. Just try to keep in mind that it needs to be about drinking water. We can't veer off that too much, but this does cover quite a lot of ground. So just wanted to put that out there. And I put together sort of this list of categories of topics that we've covered over the past 6 years. General things, PFAS is a big one, and I didn't include all the subheadings of all the PFAS discussions that we've had. But in general, things again, I'll go over the PFAS history tonight. Regulations will be covered a little bit tonight. All the health studies, there's a lot of items that can be discussed with PFAS, and we should keep in tune with that. And Andrew's been great at hearing what's going on nationally with that. So we'll keep that coming. Routine updates. This is what Mason, Mariah, and I have been doing. One thing that we're going to start doing tonight is focusing on different water quality parameters, compliance parameters. Routinely monitor. We have focused in the past on lead and copper and cyanobacteria. Tonight we're going to be talking about disinfection byproducts, but there are a number of compliance parameters that it's good to just give a little deeper dive into, I think, as we go through these meetings. And again, open to anything that you're interested in along those lines. Water system tours. We've had a tour at Madbury in the Bellamy Reservoir a couple times. We've had at least one tour at the Pease Tradeport PFAS facility. I think we may be due for another one there. So that's something. And then special topics. A number of things have come up. Some of these have been repeats, like the lead in the schools. We've had a couple of updates on that. And the former Dover landfill updates, we've had a couple of those. And there are many other topics we could include here going forward. So just want to spark your thoughts on what we'd like to do this next couple of years for topics. Any thoughts about that before I move into the water supply update stuff? Any topics, anything you guys are thinking of that you might want to
any pressing issues or questions you've heard about folks in the community, or anything you think we should be covering that we haven't, or any new ideas. And certainly, we don't need to put you on the spot, but if you have any ideas, certainly make suggestions, and then you can, of course, email us anytime too.
I have a little update now that given the war that we're in right now, I got a message today about our fluoride supplies, of fluoride sourcing. There are suppliers that get their fluoride from Israel. Israel is the #2 supplier of fluoride used in drinking water. We get our supply from China, so they have not seen any impact yet. But since that supply is now lacking from Israel, I bet our supplier will now get loaded. So I don't know how that will affect our supply of fluoride, but that's something that we need to be aware of, as well as costs. You know, right now we're in our budget process for FY27, and we're assuming certain escalators for certain things. But if fuel becomes an issue and hauling costs for our chemicals, that could impact us as well. So,
Do you use hydrofluorosilicic acid?
we do. Yep. That's the one that's specifically a problem. Sodium fluoride, I don't think I haven't heard anything about that. And that's through hand. Kim.
Go ahead, Kim.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that is always sort of striking to me is that those of us that are working in this and people who are involved in environmental science and such really have a strong understanding of just how affected the entire southern half of the state is, with things like brownfields and hazardous waste sites and PFAS contamination and stuff. The general public, I don't believe, has that broad a view because they're just not aware. And so I really feel like for the purposes of personal health, it's important that this group support somehow public education for people to really understand the chemicals that surround us every day in our environment, how little those are studied or followed. You know, the whole emerging contaminants discussion we've had before. We have 60,000, compounds swirling around in the environment, and 5 are tested every 5 to 10 years. So I think that some public education, so people really understand, first of all, that we have to be careful already today with what we're exposed to. But then for the future, they're the same situation that created potentially some of the PFAS issues here. The northern part of the state is looking at starting up those activities that led to some of the contamination. And so I think public education will help us preserve more of the state water resources, and also educate people about, there are exposures that go on that we're not talking about. So that's one of the directions I would really like to see this group go in.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think something like that, we don't have the expertise to talk about that in the room. So that's something that, anybody that knows anybody that could speak to different topics like that, it would be great to keep that in mind. We've had DES has spoken many times at the SWAG, but there are probably other people out there that might be ideal for that kind of discussion.
I think some of the education centers would be great. I'm sure Laurel has some suggestions.
Yeah, I was going to chime in. I think that's a great suggestion and topic, and that's something that Silent Spring could definitely help with, both myself or some of my colleagues. So thanks for bringing that up.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Laurel. Anybody else before we move on?
Can I ask one question? You talk about tracking state legislation, and I'm sure I know you're in tune with federal legislation that's impacting all this stuff. How is that reported up to Jane Freeney in the legal office? I know they've got about 3 pages of legislation they're tracking at all times. Is there something that comes through you all right now? Yeah.
Definitely David Muse when he's here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's not here tonight. He's in Concord, but
great. Okay.
David Muse is on the SWAG and is a state representative. So he'll periodically give us updates on current legislation that's happening. But obviously Al too, his team tracks legislation.
Thank you.
All right, water supply updates. We're still in a drought, unfortunately. So because of the frost, we're not getting any of this wonderful filtration. It's just running off, and so that's why this map hasn't changed. This was just released last week. We're still considered in a severe drought, so groundwater levels are still very low across this part of the state. Let's see if it goes this way. There we go. And if we look at precipitation, we've been very much below normal for many, many months now. Over the past 12 months, we are right now 36% below normal annual average precipitation. I question these January, February data. There was quite a bit of snow. So these are still provisional data, so I don't know if they'll be adjusted or if that was basically it was dry snow. It was cold weather. We had a lot of accumulation, but the moisture content in that snow wasn't as much. So I'm waiting to see if those come in. Maybe Shannon knows more about that. Any insight on that? So yeah, we're very this is the crux of it. We're hoping that in the next March, April, May, we get the same similar rains as we did last year to help recharge our aquifer. Long-term picture, this is 29 years of precipitation data. This is the rolling 12-month average. You see we've had these periods of drought there, periods of drought around 2016, 2021, but this on the record of past 29 years, this is the longest and lowest we've experienced. Stream flow, again, going back to July last year when stream flows dropped into the lowest percentile and below normal levels, spiking in and out through that period, just has prolonged this lack of recharge to aquifers. Come late December, early January, we did get some rainfall and the snow, and now the snow melt has certainly helped stream flow, and our reservoir level did jump back up in December and it's been flowing over. So as far as surface water is concerned, we have a full reservoir. That's not to say that the watershed in an overall state is dry. Soil moisture is probably low. Groundwater levels are low throughout that. So if we don't get the rain, watershed won't be filled up. The rain might just soak into the ground out in the watershed, and we won't continue to see this very long. So we're poised, really watching the next 3 months to see if we would need to put water use restrictions on early this year. Last year, the spring rains really postponed any need to put any restrictions. So we were good through the summer, made it through okay. Unfortunately, we didn't get the rain recovery in the fall that we would have liked to. So we were already going into this deficit mode. So we're going to see how things turn out in the next couple of months. It'll be really telling. So come March, we may be talking about water use restrictions right away, which is unfortunate. But
And what would those look like, Al?
we would start off voluntary restrictions. That's typically how we do it. And then we would go to an odd even. So if you're an odd number house, you water an odd number of days. If you're even, you water an even number of days. And then we'll be able to monitor that, see how that affects our supply. And monitor our supplies, see how everything's working, if we need to go to a complete water use restrictions.
I think it's a preemptive thing. I think the perception of the public is that we're not in a drought situation with all the snow and all.
Oh, sure.
So I would think as a preemptive, if you're thinking about potentially having restrictions coming March, April, you may want to start giving people a heads up ahead of time, kind of give the public a little bit of a warning that, so they're not shocked when the time comes. Just a little,
right. Right. And there are concerns because come spring, everybody's planting. They want to be able to irrigate and all that in their gardens, and that's tough. So
just give a little heads up before it happens. And if you don't need to do it, that's great.
Right. That's true.
What are your thoughts about taking a precautionary approach and doing it anyway, given that we've more frequently been dealing with drought issues?
Could.
Oh no, I'm just curious, like what?
Yeah, no, we could. I think Rye is doing that.
Okay.
Already, so we could follow their lead and do that. It's a tough decision because once you do that, then it becomes well, you don't have enough water, and it's not really the case. Yeah, we don't have enough water in extreme conditions, but, and it's irrigation. So, yeah, and just doing a reduction where it's an every other day thing, just to make people aware. People have to- And it's a good idea to do it early because people have irrigation systems. So their irrigators are coming to program the irrigation systems for the year. Might as well program it with an odd even schedule instead. So it's a good idea.
And if you do have to put in restrictions, is there education about like rain barrels and, is there information that goes along with that too? Like here's alternatives to running a hose or something,
Should be.
Okay.
Yeah, typically we'd say this is restrictions now, and there are a lot of follow-up questions of, well, can I wash my car? Can I hand water? And hand watering is acceptable. It's just the larger. It's not.
Okay.
Does Kim, you still have your hand raised?
Yes, I have a question about industry. I understand how you can restrict water for your customers, residential customers and such, but are there any industries that don't go through the city for their water supply that actually just draw right off of rivers? And if so, is there any way that they have restrictions if the rivers are extremely low, like we saw this past year?
I do not know of any industries that pull off the river.
Thank you.
In the watershed, potentially. Yeah.
And just a thought about, I love the idea of rain barrels. I hate the idea of plastic rain barrels. If we're looking at different things, it's also a good time to actually be looking at maybe more environmentally sustainable materials for those things. Just a thought.
This is true. That's sort of can be part of that outreach education.
Is irrigation metered separately at a certain size
It is for people that want to do that, because otherwise they're paying water sewer. So it's a benefit if you want to if you have an irrigation system that meets all the water sense requirements. So it needs to be, have moisture sensors and, set at certain time periods and such. It follows all of those, that they can get an irrigation meter. So they don't need to pay as much. And those are tracked separately, right?
Yeah.
And it helps because then once people
as
have
far as
irrigation
data
meters,
from
we
what
can
you're
see.
actually how effective, I guess.
Yeah.
Observation is.
Okay, groundwater levels. So these are 4 of our wells from 4 different parts of our water supply aquifers, kind of showing the historic trends of the water levels in those aquifers. This goes back to 2012, I believe. Just wanted to note on here, 2016, the drought of 2016 was extreme, and our water levels were much lower than they are now. So we are, relative to 2016, we're better. And some of the wells, like the Portsmouth well, we haven't been using as much as of late. So those levels are considerably higher now than they have been in the past. The Greenland well water level is fairly low relative to our record of data there. So having this information helps us manage, what sources we use more than others. So we're easing up on the use of the Greenland well now. We'll start using more of the Portsmouth well. And overall, since water is flowing out of the reservoir, we're using more surface water than we are well water. This is just a close-up of since 2019, how those have varied. And you want to keep in mind here that each one of these grids is 5-foot difference in elevation, and all of our supply wells are within 15 to 30 feet of water above the screen. So we have a lot of headroom above our screen, sort of reserved water. Never want to pump down into the screen or get close to the screen, but we have that extra headroom. So it's sort of an indication of how much water is in the aquifer still. Water production overall, this is this past year, monthly water production versus the 10-year average. In general, the general is pretty close to what our 10-year average has been. Over the summer, you saw last year the dry conditions, our production was higher than it has been That goes into this, where the past 2 years have been drought years. Our demands have been higher because of the irrigation requirements over that time. It's still lower than it has been back in prior years. This is overall view of our 2025 production data. Just point I wanted to make here was how much water we're getting from the Bellamy Reservoir and their surface water treatment plant. It adds up to about 70% of our water supply is from our surface water. Just how important that source is to us. And then a note on the peas supplies. We have the 3 wells out there. Near equal withdrawals from each of those wells. Last year, we had to use some Portsmouth system water when the Haven well pump had some issues that we needed to fix right in the middle of the summer. So we depended on the Portsmouth system to help make up that water. Moving on to PFAS. So these are the latest annual averages for our PFAS data from our sources. Not much change here. Again, Portsmouth well is the one that has consistently high levels of the PFOS and PFOA, or at least higher than the EPA limit. They're still lower than the state limit. But we're watching those. PFHXS is a compound that we've seen bump up just a little bit in the past year. Looking year over year how these change. So we have concern, and we are planning to put treatment on the Portsmouth and Collins wells, as well as the Greenland well, which is still averaging slightly above the 4 parts per trillion EPA limit. All right, to now quickly, Laurel.
Yeah, just a quick question. I was curious since the Portsmouth well and I think it was the Collins well that had the highest PFAS, are you able to like pump those less or?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we have been reducing the withdrawal from the Portsmouth well over the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And do you also monitor the PFAS in the distribution system as well?
No, just through the sources.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because there's no real reason for the PFAS to change in the system. That would be a while ago. We did a few samples throughout the system, and it mimicked how we know that the water from each of the sources mixes in the system. So that's sort of the blending factor where wells feed certain parts of town more than others.
Okay, thanks.
Water supply project updates. So I'll go through each one of these here. PFAS treatment projects. I have a slide for each of these. Oh. All right, so Bellamy dam maintenance. This was a project that started last fall. They were only able to complete about 70% of this. They're injecting epoxy in some of the cracks and doing some crack sealing and some concrete repairs to the dam. Much needed work. They need to come back in the spring to finish that. I think they're scheduled for April 13th. So that should be done soon. Greenland well PFAS treatment. So this is in final design right now. We are planning to have the final design completed in August. So come September, we will put this project out to bid. The engineer's opinion of cost now is about $8.5 million, which is a lot more than what we originally planned on. Original estimate was $2.5 million about 6 years ago. So things have changed there. Still fairly simple treatment with 2 granular activated carbon vessels. As part of this project, we're going to be permitting the reactivation of the old well, the old Greenland well as a backup supply. So this site, and for emergency situations, we should be able to pump 500 gallons a minute out of. The existing well right now is permitted at 450 gallons a minute. So under emergency conditions, we'll have this extra source. We were offered SRF funds, state revolving funds, money for this for $6.5 million. So this is a loan, but with that loan, we're getting been offered 10% is forgiveness right off the top, and then we're getting another, I have the numbers. Another piece of money that will be forgiveness from the emerging contaminant fund. So overall, with this loan, we will have about $1.5 million of grant money, essentially. Forgiveness money on that loan, which is fantastic for this.
I just have a question. You said, so the initial thought was it was like around 2.5 million, and now it's up to how much?
8.
And is that because there's just so many, is that because there's a big demand of people needing PFAS treatment now because of the EPA regulations, or like what
I
made
think
that?
there's a lot of drivers. I think cost of materials, cost of services, construction is a big one. And this is, we got from the engineer, and they're basing it on some projects they're working on in Maine. You know, this is what it's now costing. So it's probably the vessels. Vessels take a while now to be constructed. And then just the general construction costs. And there were upgrades to this site that weren't foreseen then, like the road needs to be upgraded. Now we need, some more amenities to the site to make this work, moving power lines. There's other things that go into that. Yesterday, town in Greenland voted to approve City of Portsmouth purchase of 1 acre of land around here. So we'll have the room to now build a structure. We only had a postage stamp size lot here previously. So town of Greenland has voted to sell us that portion of land. Or in lieu of payment, we will be paving a portion of their parking area, just up by here. We need to upgrade this road and put pavement on here anyway to be able to get the carbon tanker trucks in to be able to load the new facility. So road upgrades is a big part of this project. So we're extending that in exchange for this land, which we need. So that's.
Can I ask one more question too? So I know that this is near the field in Greenland, right? Is it the Maloney Field? So because this is a water source, like what is there anything put in place to protect that area? And I think about like someday if they wanted to add artificial turf or something like that, is there any stipulations in buying that land that they can't do certain things with that area? I mean, right now it's a field, so we're not concerned, but are there protections or provisions?
The land we purchased, that'll be our property. The fields itself, there are not, but the town of Greenland, my impression is they are very concerned with this water. This is their water supply as well. A while ago, we put some more fencing up, so parking is now way outside of this sanitary protective radius. So now they have to go up over the hill and park sort of around the corner. There is sort of a lineup for picking up students at school that end up down this road. So there are cars, they're aware of that, and they're aware that we don't want that. But then it's a safety issue if cars are lined up on the road. So they're aware, but yeah.
Okay.
Discussion is good point. If there was a turf field, that would become a big issue. Yeah.
Laurel had a raised hand.
Laurel.
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious, what do you do with the spent activated carbon?
What we're doing now for the carbon that we use at the PFAS facility is we are part of a reactivation program where Calgon takes that media back to their facility and reactivates it. We end up reusing a portion of that. They top it off with fresh carbon, but we basically reuse the carbon.
Okay, thanks. And do you know where they regenerate it? I'm just curious.
I am not positive. Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Similarly, so the Portsmouth and Collinswell PFAS treatment, since the PFAS contamination in this area, these two wells are part of the southern well field. They're part of the contamination zone from the Pease Trade Port. The Air Force has been pushed to pay for this. We have asked once, we are submitting another second formal request for the Air Force to pay for the design and construction of a PFAS facility for the Portsmouth and Collins wells. First request did not go anywhere. So we are now increasing that request, and we need to get the SWAG involved. body like this may be important as a voice in that demand for action. So that, and I'll get into the EPA's rule, but we're up against the timeline now for compliance. So we have put money in our capital improvement plan for FY 27. There's $600,000 in that budget. So if council approves this budget for this year, come July 1st, we will have $600,000 to begin design of the treatment plant, regardless of the Air Force. We need to move forward with this work. So that's where we'll go there. We also, in our capital improvements plan, we have $13 million, which was the engineer's initial estimate for constructing the facility. That is in FY 29 plan. We are hopeful that the Air Force will step up before then and be able to get an agreement with us to pay for that, but we need to be prepared to move ahead with the treatment for both of these. You know, they're really important water supply sources for us. So we're moving forward with that.
And when is that getting submitted, or has it been submitted yet?
It has not been submitted yet. We're working on it. Within the next few weeks, we hope to have the legal on that.
Okay.
The project that I have been talking about for a while now is our water storage tank painting. We have the funds necessary to do this project from previous CIP approval, so we're moving ahead. I had hoped that we would be painting the Spinney tank this spring, but because it took longer to get the bid documents together, get it ready to post, everything's gotten pushed back. So the bid is expected to go out now on March 26th, a couple weeks. That will go out to bid for beginning the painting at the Spinney Road tank this fall. And then followed by the Newington Booster tank the following spring. And then if there are still funds available, we'll do the upgrades for the Lafayette tank that fall of 2027. So it's a 1.5-year project overall. Let's get going. And that includes rehab. There's definitely places where there's a lot of corrosion on these tanks. It'll be the installation of cathodic protection in all these tanks to extend the life of all of them. And then a fresh coat of paint on the outside of all of them. Some interior rehab as well. So
Does it need to be empty, assuming it's done in the summer?
it does.
That's
Yep. That's gonna be.
so you just go over.
That's what we're doing. We're doing fall and spring, so off peak times a year. And it will be another big important public outreach because Spinney Road, we can only draw down so much before the pressure is dropped in the system too much. So there'll be potentially 300,000 gallons of water that we need to get rid of. You know, which the big picture, the amount of water that we use in a day is closer to 4 million gallons a day. So it's not a whole lot, but it'll be water running down the street into storm drains and out the back to drain that tank down. Yeah. And that's time frame for draining it, time frame for getting the conditions right for the repairs and painting. So it'll be tight. I think Spinney was scheduled to begin in early September and go until like early November. There's a certain time window where the humidity's got to be just right on this.
We go back to one slide.
Okay.
There. I don't know how to say, I'm trying to say this nicely.
That's okay.
Considering that weakening concerns over the effects of PFAS from the EPA and others right now, I'm concerned about the Air Force's response to your request for funding. I would think now it might be a good time now to, with the election year coming, that might be a good time to start notifying our national delegation of this impending problem that it looks like if this anti-PFAS concern continues, that it might impact the city of Portsmouth funding that request, and we need to get maybe put a little political pressure now. I know the Department of Defense, I guess it's still officially, spent a whole bunch of money towards the end of this last fiscal year because they were gonna either spend it or lose it.
Oh, yeah.
So by September 30, they spent, I don't know how many, $26 billion, all kinds of silly stuff. Unfortunately, I think that could have been a good opportunity to use that money to, if they're gonna waste it, at least waste it in the right direction. But that's gone now, so, but I think we need to think about what's gonna happen in terms of what the future is for the funding for that.
Yep, I think that's.
Yeah, it's something we're tracking closely, and we'll talk about at the end. There's also the RAB, the Restoration Advisory Board with the Air Force. So this is a topic that comes up at every single meeting. Our staffers from our congressionals attend those meetings, so they're certainly aware of the issue. But I fully agree, like the Air Force should be paying for this. They don't deny that it's their contamination. But they're just not, they haven't moved forward in providing funding, and it's important that the city of Portsmouth doesn't have to pay for this treatment. You know, the Greenland well.
Yeah, contamination is a significant public health issue as we think it is right now.
Yeah, and I think what we're running up against is Pease is just one of 700 sites that the DoD is dealing with, you know? So, and that these types of directives are coming, like not even just Air Force, Pentagon level, you know, over all the military branches. But regardless, the Air Force is responsible for this contamination. They should absolutely be paying for the treatment. That's something I remain very committed to advocating for strongly. And we do discuss that also at our RAB, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and engage with our congressionals about it as well. But yeah, it's frustrating for sure. Oh yeah, Kim.
Yeah, I just have a mechanical question about the water towers. Does all of the development with large housing complexes and with hotels, does that affect how those 3 towers work? Will there become a point where you need to add additional towers, or is that not a concern?
No, so typically there's an equation for amount of volume required for fire suppression services, and that's sort of how it gets affected, because it's that fire suppression need. If there were a fire in any of those buildings, there's a certain amount, time, and volume of water necessary to be able to be provided. And right now, the storage that we have is far in excess of what that need is. So, you know, more development just means our wells are going to be more often, our treatment plant's going to be on a higher rate type of thing. All right, I left this slide on here, the Little Bay Water Transmission Main. It's still a very important project. We've done a lot. We've replaced the valves on both sides. We have a design to be able to put a 3rd line under this bay. These lines are going on 70 years old, and we need to put this 3rd main under the bay. Unfortunately, it's going to be a very, very expensive project. We continue to put this as a request in for state revolving fund money. This was a priority project from the state's perspective. Unfortunately, we don't have the match money, and they didn't offer any forgiveness on their loan this time around. But we will continue to make sure it's on the DES's priority list. That makes us more eligible for other grant funds. So we're going to keep working on this. I think in our CIP, we have money budgeted in FY31 to do this. And hopefully by then we will be able to get some matching funds to help. Something that needs to be done. And it's currently permitted. So through the wetlands, it needs to still go through the Corps of Engineer permits, but that's the process. Then I thought I'd mention this, even though it doesn't directly affect our water quality quantity. It reflects our revenue, and our revenue controls all of the work that we need to do to keep maintaining all of our infrastructure. So it is somewhat related. But we are in the middle of conducting a water rate study. Stantec is the consultant that has been helping put that together. And just briefly, and we've had 2 work sessions so far on this. which are online if you care to watch those details. But here's sort of the considerations that went into the study. The rate structure, right now we have a two-tier structure from 0 to 10 units. You pay a certain rate. From over 10 units, you pay a higher rate. So the thought is we would have potentially more tiers as part of this recommended rate structure. Water and sewer rates in general need to go up, but it's important to know who's going to be impacted by those rates. So that tiered structure helps focus those rates on the higher demand users, those that are cost more to provide water to. Fixed service fees, or what we call fixed charges. So this is the sort of a flat fee just for our ability to provide water to people. This is billed per meter size. So your domestic water user, you typically have a 5/8 meter or 3/4 inch meter. For the past 24 years, you've been paying $4.95 a month for that meter. That's your fixed fee. That equates to about 7% of our overall revenue. Industry standard says we should be collecting between 15 and 30% as fixed fees. So this is going to be a help if we follow the recommendations of Stantec, is to get us closer to the 15% of our overall revenue will come from fixed fees. So there'll be a greater charge just for having that ability to have water. So that comes through your meter size. So the places that use more water will have a larger meter. They'll be paying more for that ability to serve. But this also goes into why the rate structure should change, because the people that use 1 or 2 tiers, they don't want to all of a sudden be paying a lot more for the fixed charges. So in the tiered structure, that first tier will actually be paying less per unit of water. And they will in turn be paying more for the fixed charges, and it will balance out. So other considerations are the wholesale water and sewer rates. This pertains to Rye, Newcastle, and the charges for them. Capacity use surcharge fees. This is for new users when people want to tie into our system. This counts as a buy-in fee. We've invested so much in our system. For someone to tie in, they need to kind of buy in to our infrastructure. And there's formulas for this that Stantec has used to derive at those recommended surcharge fees. And then there's other fees that Stantec reviewed also, like our fire services and hydrant fees. We charge municipalities per hydrant for maintenance and ability to serve fire protection in all of our towns. So I think that's it for my section right here. Any thoughts, questions about overall supply update stuff?
Those updates to the wells, are those 100-year plans or 50-year plan? You know, you talked about like under Great Bay, like how do they, with the carbon, is it a long-term?
For the
Like will Sloan and Visamica, will they have to deal with this? Like, you know.
right, well, yeah, well, PFAS is here forever, so
Yes,
these
yeah.
plants, they're gonna need to be there for forever. We don't want to just build a shed and hope it's gonna be good enough, so we need to build a facility that's gonna be able to provide. So, you know, we think 100-year, I mean, this goes back to our piping distribution system. You know, those pipes are considered between 70 and 100-year assets, you know, and then they corrode, they fail, they need to be replaced. In order to keep up with that maintenance, we need to replace 1%. We have about 200 miles of pipe in Portsmouth. So that would equate to replacing about 2 miles of pipe every year. That would cost us about $4 million. It's hard to keep up with that. You know, we can only put so much money in the CIP, but that's sort of that replacement cost. You need to think about lifespan for all this stuff. And for many years that wasn't done because everything was new at one point in time, right? So then it's like, it works, so don't mess with it. And I think we're getting to that point of end of life, a lot of like the transmission main. 70 years of sitting in salt water.
Yeah.
So here we are, unfortunately. Move over to
All right.
Mason to get into.
Switching gears a little bit, just for the new faces here. I know many of the people in this room have heard me give this presentation before. It's kind of my hot button topic every time I'm here now. I switched the slides up a little bit just to make it a little bit more interesting, but I've been on the forefront of this project for the service line inventory that you may have heard about. Every public water system throughout the country is required to inventory every service line and its material makeup by 2037. So we have about a little over 10 years to do that. Really, the main purpose and the goal of this project is to remove any potential source of lead that is tied to the distribution system. I'll dive right in here. That does not work, does it? So a little update since my last presentation back in December. Back in November, we sent out notification letters that is a part of the federal rule and regulation to anyone we don't have information on, we don't have records for in terms of unknown service line materials, but also those with galvanized steel service lines. We sent out about 2,300 of those letters. This was the second round of notification letters from the year prior, back in 2024, when we submitted our first baseline inventory. Out of those responses, the second time around, I got about 80 calls and emails. And I was able to schedule 12 service line material inspections on the privately owned portion of service lines. And with that, those letters, it prompted free lead testing that is offered and funded by the state. But something that comes with that is the system has to compile these kits, communicate with the homeowner, drop it off to them, and then coordinate the pickup and the submittal as well. So huge shout out to Mariah for getting 43 free lead testing kits out there since these letters went out in November. Out of those 43 kits that were delivered, 23 actually participated and submitted their samples. And out of all of those participants, there were no detections of lead with that testing. So the overall service line inventory status, this is combined across both the Portsmouth and Pease Tradeport water systems because we're responsible for both inventories. We have a little over 8,600 service lines, service connections. And we like to split it up between what is the customer-owned portion and what is the city-owned portion because they can vary in terms of material types across the shutoff valve. And that's the split ownership that goes on with every service line. So out of all of our services, we've identified 8,200. We still have about 457 unknowns left to identify on the privately owned portion. And the majority of our unknowns are on the city-owned portion. Really just because of, the record keeping back in the early 90s and before was all just hand-drawn on little tie cards. We had to go through and digitize as many as we could. There's a lot of missing records there. And so we still have 2,000 left to identify, and to get eyes on it, it requires potholing. We have 137 galvanized services that are present, which makes up about 2% of the overall services that we've identified. And these require replacement under the rule because historically speaking, there were lead connectors that tied the galvanized services to water mains. And that is the purpose for that. So out of those identified to the pie chart off to the left, 87% are copper, 5% are still unknown, 2% galvanized, and 6% are HDPE. Okay. So to tackle the city-owned portions and those identifications of the 2,000 that we have left to tackle, we are doing this with a statistical analysis approach, really with developments that were built around the same time. We can do a 36% verification in terms of potholing down to the service line on our side. To basically rule out the rest of these services and their material makeup within that development. So we've already tackled about 15 within the Maple Haven development. We need a total of 48, so we have 33 remaining, and we're starting that up next week. Following that, we'll tackle the Elwyn Park area, which is another 140 to 160 services, and we'll do the same approach. It takes a lot of time, money, effort, and staff to get this done. So on the front of monitoring data, these collections are a little different than the free lead testing opportunity. This is compliance protocols that we have to follow based on the state regulation. This is carried out every single year across the Portsmouth water system and the Pease water system. But I just wanted to throw this update that I already really talked about most of this last time, but 31 samples were collected throughout the Portsmouth water system. All of them were from galvanized service line locations. And out of all of that testing, there were only 2 detections of lead. One was at 1.4 parts per billion. The other was 2.9 parts per billion. The action level that is set on the federal and the state level is 15 parts per billion, but it will drop down to 10 here soon in 2027. The Pease Tradeport monitoring results, 21 samples were collected from residential properties in Newington and businesses throughout the Tradeport. There was only 1 detection at 1.2 parts per billion. Yes.
And the 2 that were positive, were those first draws?
Yes, all of them were first draw.
And those are residential?
Yes.
People advised to do.
Yes, they're notified immediately as soon as we get the report from the accredited lab within 24 hours. Mariah's really good about getting those letters out.
Advised
Yep.
to flush their system in the morning first before they use it, and then
They are.
15 seconds or so. And then
Yep. We slip an info sheet in with our emails along with the report that they receive with recommendations moving forward. And it really does come down to flushing with cold water. I've seen it myself with 30 seconds of flushing, sometimes less. It's gone like that. Really just comes back to this conversation of, the sources of lead don't just come from the service line. It can come from old fixtures and lead solder, connecting your internal plumbing as well, which is difficult to kind of relay to people when we're taking this whole initiative to identify every service line. And there's very specific language that is required through the regulation as well.
Can I just ask about the 2 detections? So those folks had galvanized service lines
They did.
and they had the lead detection, but in the past, we've had other people who don't have the galvanized lines that have lead hits, and it's likely more of a fixture issue, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay.
You can kind of assume at that point with a galvanized service line, and especially with the first draw collection, it's not going to tell you whether or not it's coming from a lead connector that is, going from the main to the service line itself. So it really does take further investigation, and that's something that we offer as well, especially if they're exceeding or approaching the action limit of the 10. We're abiding by the 10 part per billion level right now. But with levels of lead this small, flushing will remove it very quickly. So that's something that we recommend. We still talk to people about pushing forward and having the opportunity to carry out their own testing at different fixtures and taps throughout their homes. So some people don't do it from the kitchen always, which is a little frustrating from our perspective because it's like you're not consuming water, on your 3rd floor bathroom tap. And then we get the hit, and it's kind of a poor reflection about our corrosion control practices, like on the front of treatment as well. I think with all the data that we've seen, it looks great, and we're doing a good job with that form of treatment. But if people aren't following the protocol and we have elevated levels from these old bathroom fixtures, then it kind of spins that. Yeah.
And to get a lead test on your own is not a very costly thing, right?
No, it's $25. Yep. And it's a pretty quick turnaround time too.
We're still offering, that's still an offer, right, to get this.
Yeah, we're still offering the free
It is.
registration. So
Yep.
It's free right now.
Still free. Right along.
Oh, can I ask one more question about potholing?
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a very obvious question, but there's no other technology available that would require you not like having to dig this hole to look, there's not like videos or I don't know, I feel like.
Yeah.
Let's try.
People have tried, yeah, they're
Okay,
trying
it's
to
just-
make a quick buck off of it for sure, but on the front of the regulation, which we want to follow to a T as much as we possibly can, you need to get a visual inspection of that pipe.
Okay.
Which does require potholing.
Which is frustrating.
It's
It's
very
frustrating for us
frustrating.
because we know word of mouth and the records that we do have, we never installed any kind of galvanized lead jumpers or anything that for years and years and years. We
Yeah.
just don't have it written down anywhere so clearly and concisely.
And even with some like accurate assumptions based on this historic information, the state will not accept that. So it is, and same with the federal level, they need visual inspection. So it's a lot to manage.
And the process of potholing itself, it's just digging a hole like into the ground.
Yeah,
Is it
do you
something?
wanna go back to that?
You
Is
Very- I
that
meant
something you
to-
do in half a day or like how disruptive is it to the neighborhood?
Yeah, so this is a perfect
Yeah,
example. This
so-
is within Maple Haven. This was
Just a-
toward the end of fall. That's as big of a hole that it really gets to.
Okay,
Sometimes if they run into, tree stumps or roots that are passing, in the direction of the shutoff valve, which is where they're creating the pothole, it becomes a little bigger than that. But it's not super invasive if it's in the grass like this. Sometimes you do have shutoff valves that are, on the sidewalk or in the street. And that's unfortunate for our team to be out there because it requires a hell of a lot more work.
Yeah.
It's also an opportunity for them to replace the rod in the box as part of that shut-off valve. And that's what they did at a few places at Maple Haven. I
Okay.
saw they were old and they could fix them while they were there.
and
and-
how many in a day would you do?
Oh, yeah, 5.
Five
Like
potholes
5
a
to
day?
6, yeah.
And when you're done at the end of the day, those are all covered over and
Yes.
done, okay?
Yep.
And so you're doing Maple Haven right now, but we'll be moving to Elwyn Park soon?
Maple Haven, we still need to finish. We have 33 more.
Okay,
So we're trying to dedicate at least one full day a week. We have limited staff with that. We're trying to push for 2 days at least of just dedicating more time because of how many unknowns we have. But as soon as we're done these 33, we can check off 132 in total if they're all copper. If we find one galvanized, then we have to individually
single one.
pothole we have to pothole 132.
So right now, our staff is handling this. We do want to get a contract in place with someone to do this for us.
okay.
We do have funds from the state to help with that.
Yeah.
It's a process.
I said, did this start this past fall? Before then?
No, so I think the rule was finalized in 2022, which is when we started compiling our inventory. There wasn't enough like solidified information and requirements at that time. So it wasn't until, just prior to us submitting our initial baseline inventory in 2024 that we started hitting this hard. So in February of 24 is when we had 17 or 1,800 unknowns on the privately owned portions of the services. So basically just going down into basements and foundations and
Yeah.
visually inspecting. We're now down to a little over 400. from
Yeah,
February.
I say because, and I don't remember the details, but it was certainly a few years ago. Where I have a galvanized line and I did the lead test and somebody did come in, but came into the basement. And it actually, you can tell because it comes in through the wall,
Yep.
one of the little stub.
Yep.
The
So
private
that-
side.
So
So
I
that-
guess.
You're one of the 137 that we.
I'm one of them, yeah. Put a magnet on it. I can't, it either sticks or
It
doesn't.
does stay if
does,
it's
yeah.
galvanized, yeah. You could be one of those cases where we didn't have the information tied to your portion of the line, but we did on our side, and that happens too. Again, that's why
It was like
you
2022.
say like 8,700 service connections. We think about it like double that number in terms of really understanding what's going on, because you can have varying materials.
Yeah, we saw this regulation coming back in 2016. We had our meter crews, whenever they're changing out a meter, they would take note of the material.
Right.
So we have a good inventory from that. Which is good.
And meters get changed out how often?
Every 10 years.
Well, this potholing is to identify city side material,
Strictly the city.
not
Oh, city,
residents.
okay, I
And
got
that's the
Yeah, right.
difference. We can, it's so much easier to identify homeowners because usually it's coming through a wall
Yeah.
or something like
Okay.
that. So much harder on our side.
All right, ready for the next agenda item?
So usually we have, there's so much changing PFAS things. At every meeting, it seems like we're talking about updates. Since our last meeting, there wasn't any substantial kind of federal or state updates, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to just give like an overview of the last 12 years of like how PFAS has evolved and what the city's done to apply. And so Al compiled this
Yeah, it's sort of-
story for us.
Sort of a redo from what Brian Getz did when he was here probably a year and a half or 2 years ago. Talked through the PFAS story. So you've probably maybe you've already heard this, and I'll do it. I'll give you my version of it. So now you have that. And when he did it, it was 10-year retrospective. Now we have 12 years, so we have a little bit more insight. But going back to the landscape back in 2009, we had PFAS health advisories in place for PFOA, PFOA, and PFOS at 400 parts per trillion and 200 parts per trillion, which now seems extremely high. 2012 is when, so every 5 years, the EPA comes up with a contaminant monitoring list, and from that, they derive an unregulated monitoring compliance subset of contaminants to monitor. And in 2012, PFAS was a portion of those contaminants that we monitored. Back then, the laboratory test methods weren't that great, so the detection limits were a lot higher than they are now. So we certainly didn't see the levels in some of our sources, but we did get a hit at the Haven Well, which was extremely high. I think the point here was there was PFAS known in some sites around the country, but not many at that time. An overview of the Peace Trade Port system, Haven Well out on the runway, the Harrison Well off to Grafton Road, and the Smith Well out behind C&J bus station. The Haven Well, background of that is one of the original water supply wells for Portsmouth. When the Air Force moved in, they took that well from us to supply the Air Force, and in turn, they built all of our water infrastructure in Madbury, our wells, the reservoir, the treatment plant, sort of in exchange for the Haven Well. So the Haven Well has been instrumental to everything water in Portsmouth forever. It's a fantastic well, great yield and water quality besides the PFAS. So with the base closure in the early 90s, there was a lot of cleanup that was going on. And at this time, 2014, the Air Force had things under control. All the records of decisions were in place for remediation. Things seemed to be in place. Water quality from the Haven Well was excellent based on all the synthetic and volatile organic results we were having at that time. Everything looked good until that UCMR sampling happened. In April of 2014, the city sampled all of our supply wells. It says here that I think it was just the Peace Trade Port wells at that time because there was concern of the AFFF contaminating those wells. So that was an indication. And then May 12th of 2014, we were notified of the high level in the Haven Well. That first sample came back at 2,500 parts per trillion, which was extremely high. The Haven Well was immediately shut down. And additional samples were taken of all of the other Portsmouth water supplies just to see if it was anywhere. But again, the detection limits were so high, we didn't see the lower limits, didn't see any detections in the Portsmouth wells. We saw slight detections in the Smith and Harrison wells. And then that hit the news, and Brian went on every radio and television program around and met with council, and the news was out. One of the biggest causes for the Haven well contamination was the fire on the runway in 1990. There's a YouTube video of this plane being put out with foam, and many, many gallons of foam was put on this plane fire. And at this time, still in 2014, they were called PFCs, perfluorinated compounds. They weren't yet named the polyfluoral alkyl substances, which they've become, known as PFAS. Health concerns are at parts per trillion. I like the analogy of what is a part per trillion. I like the time one where it's 1 second in 32,000 years. Like crazy. There's other ones like a grain of sugar in the Olympic-sized swimming pool or something like that. So, but the issue with PFAS is it bioaccumulates. So even though these levels are extremely low, we all know this, it bioaccumulates and causes health problems. So we were just learning this all in 2014. Meetings happened. I was hired in 2015 to help Brian out with all this because we knew it was going to be a big lift. I still remember getting on the first stakeholder calls with the Air Force and DES and EPA discussing this. And the question came up, so what are you going to do about it? Where are you going to put treatment on? What's going to happen? And it was like silence on the call. Soon after that, things started moving. Later in 2015, all the technical teams got together to work out a variety of issues. We did a well replacement study because, contingency, what if we couldn't treat this? What if the Haven well was offline? What do we do in a hurry? Are there any other places we could put a well in to help for our supply? Treatment feasibility studies, like carbon was being used at other places around the country, but would it work with our water? So we initiated some pilot studies and treatment design stuff. And with all those, the point here was we worked closely with the Air Force. The Air Force was very good at issuing these environmental services cooperative agreements for certain phases of work to help us with that. July 2015, the EPA ordered the Air Force to provide treatment for the aquifer that supplies Haven well. It's basically to remediate the aquifer associated with the Haven well. Also to provide a design for treatment of and plans for the treatment of the Harrison and Smith wells because they knew that the groundwater was headed in that direction. They weren't at the levels of Haven, so it wasn't an immediate issue to treat those wells, but they needed to have a plan in place. And the EPA order also included 2 other systems. So our drinking water facility isn't the only treatment facility out there. There is the Haven well aquifer treatment that went in place where essentially the engineers built an extraction wall to pull the plume of PFAS out, treat it, and re-inject it. So it's kind of the traditional groundwater remediation process of remediating an aquifer. And that was done at the aquifer upgradient of the Haven well with the intention that they're going to basically treat the water, upgradient, re-inject clean water that we would receive at the Haven well. That's all in place and has been working very well, I must say, since they went into service in April 2019. There is a third treatment system. So the Air Force had a fire training area, sort of the northern part of the site called Site 8. The groundwater from here flows towards Newington, so it's not necessarily contributing to us. It's a whole other area of contamination. So that is also a treatment facility up there, pumping water and re-injecting as part of the treatment, just so you're aware of all the work that's been done out there. Part of the finding of the PFAS, the Restoration Advisory Board was reinstated. So the Air Force, whenever there's a Superfund site, the Air Force develops a RAB, Restoration Advisory Board, to get the community involved in the solution and make sure that communities can be heard. There's a lot more to that, and we have.
I just want to add that in 2015, Mayor Lister appointed the Community Advisory Board. For us, that was that we did from Andrew and I was chair. Andrew was part of that, Kim, and it led to a lot of work, including a lot of blood testing. We did a lot of children blood testing and work with the State Department of Health and Human Services.
Moving on, there's a lot of slides here, so I know Brian went through these pretty quickly. April 2016, we ran pilot studies to prove out the granular activated carbon. Also happening in 2016 was the lowering of the lifetime health advisory by the EPA. So PFOA and PFOS went down to 70 parts per trillion as a health advisory. At this time, there was still no guidance on drinking water limits, but these were sort of used as sort of a interim sort of guidance on what might be acceptable for drinking water levels. Later in 2016, we installed 2 carbon vessels to treat the Harrison well and the Smith well. And those were set up in series like this. These were in operation from 2016 to 2021. We went through, I think, 4 different carbon changeouts in that period. It enabled us to provide PFAS-free water to the Pease trade port from the Smith and Harrison well over that period, with the exception of we still had to pump water from the Portsmouth system into Pease to help make up for the loss of water that we had from Haven well being offline. So that was a stressful time. So then in 2017, we moved ahead with the design for a final treatment plan. At that time, treatment technology was still sort of up in the air. Carbon was the surefire, yeah, I can do it, but it couldn't take out the short chains very well. For higher concentrations, it wasn't very effective because you have to change out the carbon very often. So we looked at the anion exchange option. A company that was testing this came in to test this for us, and were able to identify an ion exchange resin that could remove PFAS a lot better, more efficiently than the carbon. Through that study, we revised our final designs for the Grafton Road treatment facility to incorporate the resins. So at the Pease drinking water facility now, we have the wells come into cartridge filters. These are 10-micron cartridge filters just to take out particulates to help protect the life of the resin vessels. They go through a lead lag pair of ion exchange vessels. And then after that, they go through a granular activated carbon filter. The carbon filter was really kept in the system because at this time, the ion exchange resins weren't a proven surefire way of treating for PFAS. So we wanted to make sure we had the GAC filters to take out anything that might be remaining, and it's sort of a backup, basically. Layout of the plan, we can go visit this at some point. Still pretty much operation. Went out to bid in 2019. This is sort of the timeline. So it took a year to design, took about 2 years to build, get online. Meanwhile, 2019, that interim airfield treatment system went online. Air Force, which was great because then we started seeing the PFAS concentrations coming to the Pease plant be a lot less for us. Meanwhile, our facility was being built 2019, same old. We had to continue operations of the Smith and Harrison well through the carbon vessels throughout the construction period. This is basically the 3 wells coming in, the Haven well, the Smith well, and the Harrison well coming into a manifold, and then going over to our treatment facility and then back into the system. So as the building was being torn down, we still needed to maintain operations. And now there's another milestone when the state had taken the lead on developing MCLs for drinking water. Since the EPA wasn't moving very fast on that, Andrea and our regulators to pushing this forward with getting MCLs or maximum contaminant levels for our drinking water, which are still set at this level today, and these are still where we are operating. 12 for PFOA, 15 for PFOS, 18 for PFHXS, and 11 for PFMA. Safe Water Advisory Group, again, October 2020. Just a shot of inside of the filter there. And finally, in April and July of 2021, we had approvals to operate and reactivate the Haven well, so that went online and has been operating very well since, completely removing regulated PFAS, short chain PFAS, PFBA and PFPEA are the two short chain compounds that are going through the filters. But not regulated and not a high concern. 2 years of construction, yep, I mentioned that. On time and on budget, overall cost for the construction, this was 10.8 million for the construction part of it, about 2 million for the engineering and construction oversight work. I think that would be a whole lot more now.
Is the Greenland well a similar, maybe smaller? Is it a similar
Much smaller.
process?
So this facility is 1,200 gallons a minute, about 1.7 million gallon a day facility. Greenland well is 450 gallons a minute. So much just smaller scale. We don't need to have the ion exchange resins because the concentrations aren't very high. The carbon will be able to last probably for 2 or 3 years there without an issue. Yep.
And then this is all just curiosity stuff, but, and then I think it's Haven well,
yep.
Re-injection. How do they do that as far as getting results back and knowing you can inject it? Is it held?
It's that, so that's all Air Force. They have their own.
Oh, they
system.
run it.
They pump out the water, run through their treatment. They're using the same, I don't think actually the same exact resin, but they're using ion exchange resin and carbon as well. Reverse order, they run through the carbon first to take organics out, and then they go through their resins and then re-inject.
They don't have like real-time detection of the.
No,
they just test.
They test the yeah. As yeah. Yep. And another component of their system is just upgrading of the Haven well. They have what's called the interim mitigation well. A well similar to the Haven well, same aquifer, 150 feet away, that's extracting water. So that's sort of creating another area of depression. So the water that we're pumping out of Haven is more from the southern portion of it. So it's sort of an extra buffer. So what they're seeing, what they're pumping out, maybe 1,400 parts per trillion of PFAS, but what we're seeing is closer to 300 parts per trillion of PFAS. So it is working out. I'm sure this is going to be coming around. It's working for us, and because that also helps the lifespan of our resins and everything too, because we're not seeing that high concentration. They're doing it themselves.
One thing I'll add too is that the PFAS that they're taking out of their filters, they're sending to a landfill, like a hazardous waste landfill. The DOD did have a moratorium on incinerating PFAS, which I think just recently got lifted, is what I'm hearing. But although that's great, like they're taking the PFAS out of our community, they're just sending it somewhere else. And that's the biggest, I think, concern, or one of the biggest concerns with PFAS is that we're not ever really getting rid of it. We're just kind of moving it around. And yes, it's going to a Class C hazardous waste landfill. So, it's just important thing to recognize that, we're taking it out of our community, but we're putting it in somebody else's.
That's what I call forever chemical.
Yeah.
Frustrating. It's a black hole. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
We're doing the same with our resin. It goes to a Class C landfill. Another point here is these through the construction and now through the operation for the years that it's been in operation, we have year agreements with the Air Force for that continued operation. Air Force has been paying about $1 million a year for us to continue operating this facility. We're now trying to work out a 5-year agreement with the Air Force, so we at least have a 5-year span for operating. And there's some discussions there about what's acceptable operations. How, probably know this in treatment, when you run a filter, you want to run it to exhaustion. But we're running a drinking water facility here, we can't run it to exhaustion. So there's a point where we need to change out the resins and the carbon before breakthrough. So that's the discussion point with the Air Force right now.
Kim's hand is raised down.
Oh, hi, Kim.
Hi, what Andrea just mentioned, and you as well, about the PFAS just being pushed on to another community. That is a huge ethical burden. That just makes me so sad. And that might be another point of what this group does for work I understand that there are real concerns about how do you really destroy this. And, the methods we thought were more effective a while ago are not. But I would like to become more educated as a SWAG member about the disposal methods and their effectiveness and push for some sort of a real solution. I mean, there are compounds that can be destroyed under ultra high pressure and temperature systems. And I don't know where we are with PFAS, but I have to tell you, one of the biggest burdens of all of this has been that understanding that because we have the ability to move this stuff to somewhere else, that's what we're doing, and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, no, excellent point, Kim. There's a lot of effort being put into PFAS destruction. There's a lot of companies out there working on this. The RAB had a presentation, I think it was last year or maybe the year before, I can't remember the exact date, on different PFAS destruction technologies that the DoD is looking into and funding research on. So, I mean, I think we are going to see things continue to evolve. I know there's a super critical water oxidation. SQO is like one of the more leading technologies right now where, they are able to destroy PFAS. The state of New Hampshire had a AFFF take back program, and they used a company, they collected the AFFF around the state, and then they used a company that has SQO to destroy the AFFF. So there is definitely progress being made, but in terms of, the DoD and what they're doing out at Pease, as far as I know, they're still landfilling the PFAS that they are capturing in the filters. And so it's something we will continue to talk about on our RAB. And I completely agree that there's ethical implications to it. And a lot of these places with landfills or even incinerators tend to be in, environmental justice communities and communities that lack resources to be able to kind of fight back against these things. So it's certainly something to be aware of and something that I don't take lightly either. And as much as I'm grateful that we're filtering out our PFAS, it doesn't feel great that we're just moving it around.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, success. It's funny to see this picture. Not funny, but you remember COVID? See the old pictures. Yeah, just the overall timeline, what we went through from finding it through treatment. That was a lot happened there. Now I just wanted to just go through the sort of the regulatory and how things changed here. So we got to 2019 with the state of New Hampshire setting the MCLs. In 2022, the EPA issued revised health advisories at extremely low levels, where PFOA was now issued a health advisory 0.004 parts per trillion. That's not even measurable in water, but with the extrapolation and health studies, they were able to identify these low levels being a problem. Then in 2024, finally the EPA established MCLs for PFAS compounds. April 10th, 2024, 6 compounds were regulated. And the compliance deadline was set by the EPA for drinking water systems to meet these requirements as 2029. So we're all moving ahead that this is the way to go. And then come May 14th, 2025, the EPA just issued a news release saying they're going to rescind a bunch of these compounds and only retain the requirements for PFOS and PFOA at 4 parts per trillion. Bigger picture, that doesn't affect our need to put treatment on any of our sources. And what we've heard from the state, that doesn't affect any of the states because PFOA and PFOS are the two that are really driving treatment requirements. But the other part of this is the compliance deadline was mentioned that it would be extended to 2031. Since this time, there's been no news from this news release. There was mention that a rule would need to be in place by the end of the year, I believe, issued, and then finalized early this, like February this year, which hasn't happened. So that's been silent right now. So all we can do is say the April 10th rule is still in effect. We still need to meet our compliance deadline in 2029, and these are what we're going to be looking at for compliance requirements.
Just one other addition, and Andrew, you may want to, so when did the ATSDR establish the CAP?
2016.
2016, the Community Advisory Panel for ATSDR, CDC, ATSDR,
Yeah.
which has been active, was active, now it's called a moribund and involved with multiple studies around the country, doing multi-site studies, like, including Pease and Portsmouth. So we're still waiting for that to happen.
Results. Yep.
How has ATSDR been affected?
Well, they're part of CDC, so
Oh, yeah, okay.
you know how that goes.
Yep. Okay. Another point here, so something to be aware of come April, the way that this rule is written, April 2027, we need to notify all of our customers that PFAS is in the water and that it exceeds the EPA standard. I'm hoping that will not be an alarm. I'm hoping people understand about PFAS at that time, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't know where we are with PFAS, so there'll be a lot of messaging that will need to go out with that. As we've known about this, we've monitored for this, we have plans in place for treating this, et cetera.
So it's April of this year or next?
2027.
Okay.
Yep, next year.
Well, I certainly think as a swag, we can think about ways too about getting information out ahead of time or just bracing people that information's coming and yeah.
And at that time, hopefully there will be movement on the design and there'll be construction of Greenland Well. There'll be further along the design for Portsmouth and Collins at that time as well.
So you showed at the beginning, I think you showed kind of the source numbers, right? I forget what they were, but are you in compliance with those 4 parts per trillion?
The Portsmouth Well is around 7 and 5 parts per trillion.
With no treatment on it.
No treatment. Collins Well is just over 4 and Greenland has PFOA just over 4. So just above, but regardless. It's out there and it hasn't changed. We've been monitoring as well since 2015.
Yeah.
And they were all staying. It's not going away. I don't know if you want to go, these slides were in there from before. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go through them super quick, but on the community side, I was my 2 children were at Pease going to daycare every day. My husband was working for a company. I learned about the contamination through the newspaper and, immediately started advocating for blood testing and formed a group called Testing for Pease. We were really focused on blood testing at the time with these 2 other moms, Elena Davis and Michelle Dalton. Their kids were also at Pease. If you want to go to the next slide. And, we really just, a lot of different things happened at the time. Again, the city's reacting on the water side, on the community side. You had people that worked at Pease, veterans, people whose children were there, really coming together to push for answers. And at that time, we did not have the information that we have today. Now you're almost inundated with PFAS information, or at least I am. But back then, there was not a lot of information. So we were really thirsty for knowledge, wanting to know what these chemicals meant, what they meant for our family. And so different things formed. We had the CAB, the Community Advisory Board, that was put in place by Mayor Lister at the time. And that was at the city level to really address the blood testing that the state was doing. The RAB was reinstated. If you want to go to the next slide. After we got our PFAS blood testing, it did show that the community had higher levels of PFAS in their blood when compared to the average population. And so from there, we really pushed, first it was like, just give us the blood testing. We want to know how exposed we were. And then our levels came back elevated in the community. And then we said, well, what does this mean for our health? And there really wasn't a lot of information that could be given to us. And so then we really pushed, okay, well, if you don't know, we want to be part of finding out. We want to be studied. Please do health studies here. And so that took a lot of advocacy. It took the engagement of a federal health agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ATSDR. They're essentially a branch of the CDC that studies environmental contamination in communities. So our community engaged with them and they formed a CAP, Community Assistance Panel. We actively engaged with our congressional delegation who also helped secure funding for health studies, also partnered with people like Dr. Laurel Shader, who's on the swag and on the call, who also helped with getting a PFAS health study for children and immune function. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, this just talks a bit more. We had 2 health studies going on at the same time for the PEAS community. So the PEAS study was through the federal, CDC, ATSDR agency. The PFAS REACH study was through Silent Spring. The PEAS study looked at adults and children who drank the water before May of 2014 when the Haven well was shut down. The PFAS REACH study really targeted children of mothers who drank the water at PEAS and looking at that source of exposure, as well as how it may have impacts on immune function, because we do know PFAS exposure can lower the effectiveness of childhood vaccines. Next slide, please. And then, on the community side as well, we're strongly advocating for drinking water standards, because again, when this first was discovered, we were like, how could this happen? How come no one tested for this before? These chemicals have clearly been, here for a long time. They're part of the firefighting foam the Air Force used. And so really advocating strongly at the state and federal level for drinking water standards. At first, the state came out with MCLs, which was a really big deal in New Hampshire. I mean, New Hampshire is a small state. We don't have as many resources as other states that have large drinking water quality institutes and lots of toxicologists and epidemiologists. So for New Hampshire to come out and be one of the first states to set drinking water standards ahead of the EPA, which has a lot more resources, was a really big deal and something to be celebrated. And then the EPA came out and also set their standards. Do you want to go to the next slide? And then this is just, a few pictures of the advocacy over the years. Again, we gave this presentation back in 2024, but just this journey has led to a lot of different accomplishments and opportunities as a community advocate. So a few things: I was invited by Senator Shaheen to be her guest at the State of the Union in 2019 to raise awareness about PFAS contamination at a national level. I've been asked to testify in front of Congress 2 different times. I have been in a documentary about DoD contamination. The EPA gave me an award on community engagement and advocacy. I've been to Washington, D.C. many times and have spoken to legislators and EPA administrators and Pentagon level officials at the DoD, have helped to coordinate conferences. And I think one thing that's been really rewarding about this work, and sad at the same time, is that, we talk a lot about PEAS. That's what we know. That's in our community. But there's 700 other military bases across the country dealing with this. There's Merrimack, New Hampshire with Saint-Gobain, and they have a factory that's caused PFAS contamination there. I think the largest environmental contamination in the state, actually, in that region. There's firefighters, it's in their gear. They use the firefighting foam. So it's not just PEAS, and this work has led me to really advocate not just for my family, my community, my state, but also nationwide. And it's offered a lot of opportunities and a lot of amazing milestones along the way. So I'm really grateful for that.
All right, rigid transition here. But yeah, so I guess this is something that we've talked about, or at least Al spoke to back in 2020, 2021 when the group first formed. And as you mentioned at the start of this presentation, we're looking for new topics and new things to talk about. And this has been quite some time since we've touched on this topic. So out of the 94 regulated contaminants in New Hampshire, this makes up about 11 of them. Disinfection byproducts. So what are they? They're chemical compounds that form when chlorine that we add to the drinking water to use as a disinfectant to deactivate bacteria, but also prevent waterborne pathogens. When that chlorine interacts with naturally occurring organic matter, just residual that passes through treatment, that happens with most, if not all, surface water treatment facilities. You have this formation of disinfection byproducts, and they can be broken up into 2 different groups of compounds, and that's total trihalomethanes and haloacetic acids. Why do we monitor for DBPs? They are regulated, as I mentioned, and the concentrations can vary over time just with respect to source water quality, with seasonal variations and more specifically drought conditions, which we'll get into. You can see just a greater concentration of these compounds, in the summer months as opposed to winter. How often do we collect and test for DBPs? It is based on a quarterly collection, and we have 4 sample locations throughout the Portsmouth system and 2 throughout the PEAS system. The PEAS is annually because that's strictly a groundwater treatment system, and you have far less organics in groundwater just due to natural filtration over surface water supplies. So they are regulated using a locational running annual average is what it's called. Really, we take the last 4 quarters of data that we've collected, and it's averaged to come up with this LRAA, and that is a federal and state regulation. The max contaminant levels associated with THMs and HAAs is 60 for halocetics and 80 parts per billion for trihalomethanes. If you look off to the right, this table really breaks down the compounds that make up those categories of disinfection byproducts. And the sum of those really makes up the total concentration of the total trihalomethanes or the halocetics. So how can we control the formation of these to keep them below these max contaminant levels? Really, it comes back to source management, really just minimize nutrient loading and minimize this potential for more organics to make their way into the treatment facility in Madbury. Treatment optimization, really hit it with pre-treatment, pH control, really optimize our chlorine dose and the filtration media as well, which we'll get into. Distribution system management really comes back to flushing and just water age throughout your distribution system as well. The longer water sits with these two, with the chlorine and the naturally occurring organic matter in your system, the higher your concentrations are going to be for your DBPs. So this is just a breakdown of the results over the past, 8 years for total trihalomethanes throughout the Portsmouth water system. You can see that it started off pretty high. We were approaching the 80 part per billion max contaminant level back in 2018, but as time progressed, it did start to drop a little bit. We weren't satisfied with those numbers, but we installed an aeration system in the Newington Booster Station, which is basically the first point of entry from our treated water that is distributed into town. So with that aeration system, it really does a good job with treating the water in that storage tank to basically disperse or break up this potential of the trihalomethanes forming. Again, it comes back to stagnation more than anything. Since then, we've done a pretty good job with our concentrations over time. And in 2026, Q1, we just got those results back. These are the locational running annual averages for every sample site down in the bottom left. You'll want to look at the left-hand column associated with THMs. Now, on the other side of that, we can control THMs through aeration. Haloacetic acids are harder to control in that way. They are not directly affected by aeration themselves. Now, over time, we've been hovering around like a 40 to 45 part per billion average. This past year in 2025, they have crept up a little bit, and really this comes back to the drought conditions that we experienced, the duration and the intensity of the drought. There's a much larger conversation at play as to what that does to organic matter in terms of concentration and how we're going to see more of that coming into our treatment facility. But therefore, you have a little bit more breakthrough of dissolved organic carbon, is what it's called, through your filtration media. We did not adjust our chlorine dose. It really has been the same throughout. So that's really the only factor that has changed. Pushing forward in terms of a solution to kind of bring those back down to an average level, we are looking into granular activated carbon. For our filter media, we currently have sand and anthracite, which does work well, but we've also So we're looking into that. There's a study going on with Calgon to see if that really is worth our time and resources as well, because it can be a very hefty cost, especially long term. It could be upwards of, similar conversation of the PFAS replacement in terms of media and keeping up with that, upwards of $1 million a year. The media that we have now does work well as long as treatment is optimized as such. And we feel that we've done that on the front of pH control. When you have a higher pH through your treatment process, you're really preventing that formation a lot more. And we found all this out through investigative monitoring, sampling and testing. Really, that was not compliance protocol. This is something that we did when we saw some elevation to these numbers.
It's interesting too, because we've been wanting to look at we always knew our filters in Madbury they're designed to be able to take granular activated carbon. They're designed to the depth that we could replace the filter media with granular activated carbon. So that was always the default. If we ever saw PFAS levels rising in our raw water, right now they're 2 to 3 parts per trillion, which is close to that 4. If they started going up, what would we do? And it would be put the carbon in the filters. Unfortunately, cost a lot of money to do that. And once you put it in, you're changing it out every year or two, depending on how much organics you have going into them. And the carbon in surface water treatment breaks down a lot quicker because you have to backwash that. So they change their shape more than you would in a closed vessel. So it's a lot to it, but.
Community side of things, when those numbers go up, like, do people tend to have, is there like an odor or a taste, or is there anything we experience on our end? Like, there's nothing as a consumer that we would know that level is changing.
It's similar to lead in that way. There's no taste or odor that is you're going to notice. Yeah.
Do any of the standard home filters remove any of the byproducts?
Yes, I can't.
Carbon does.
Reverse osmosis definitely does. Carbon does as well. I'm trying to think of another form. Maybe green sand, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yep.
And that was pretty much it. Trying to keep it short.
Laura raised her hand.
Hey, Laurel.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just curious, in the sort of water treatment world, in talking to other water suppliers that have put carbon in to remove PFAS, have they been seeing THM levels go down by removing organic carbon?
It depends how much they have for organics going in. But they should, if they use chlorine. So if they're using hypochlorite, so there's another option when systems have high disinfection byproducts. An option is to chloraminate. So basically you're adding ammonia along with the chlorine that binds up and doesn't create the disinfection byproducts. That's the other option to go with.
Thanks.
I seem to remember before 2018, wasn't there at the Woodbury, weren't there some exceedances?
In Newcastle. Newcastle violation because they're at the far end of our system.
Yeah.
So they were getting the travel time, basically the time it took to get there was longer. So the THMs were built up more by the time they got there. So that was one of the reasons why we put the aeration at the Dewington Booster Station. The aeration gets rid of the more component of the THM.
That's right. That's what I meant.
It's done since then, right? So, as well as Newcastle also replaced their main trunk line, water main. So water main that has any kind of biofilm growth in it can also exacerbate the disinfection byproduct problem.
All right, so we're on our last agenda item, and I promise we'll be done by 8:30. I know we have some new members, and this is recorded for the community, so I thought it'd be a good idea to just list some resources and different things for people to be aware of if they want to dive deeper or more education. So in terms of local meetings, we have our SWAG meetings. We meet quarterly here at City Hall. There's a website that has our videos, our minutes, our slides, things like that. We talked about the RAB, the Restoration Advisory Board. That meets about 2 to 3 times a year at Pease or sometimes at Newington Town Hall. And that really focuses on the environmental investigation and remediation at and around Pease. They don't really address health issues or things like that. They really do focus on the environmental. And they also have a website. The meetings are recorded and you can find information. Were you going to say?
Their next meeting is March 31st.
Yes, we have one at the end of this month. It's at Pease. I can share information with you all about that. They're going to do a tour of the Site 8 treatment plant, which is the one closest to Newington, the firefighter training area. The Air Force just did some upgrades to their plant there. And then we'll have the meeting part in Newington Town Hall. And then this has come up, their Agency for Toxin Substances and Disease Registry had a CAP, a community assistance panel. That was definitely a lot more active 2016 through about 2020, 2021, while we were actively recruiting for the health study. That one really focused on the health study, the human health impacts at Pease, the blood testing, that we don't have regular meetings anymore with them. I did actually email them earlier this year asking for an update because we haven't heard from them as a community since July. And just wanting to get an update on our health study. And they did respond that they are working to put a meeting together. So we can certainly share information, but those are kind of your local groups that are meeting. Next slide. There's a couple state commissions that you might be interested in. So the Commission on the Environment and Public Health Impacts of Perfluorinated Chemicals. That was put in place by state legislation. There's a Seacoast Commission on Long-Term Goals and Requirements for Drinking Water. Al, are you on that commission? Yeah, I believe Representative David Muse is on that, who's a SWAG member as well. And then there's also a commission to study environmentally triggered chronic illnesses. So just making you aware that there's some of those groups and websites to them. This was something that came up about private wells. The city of Portsmouth doesn't have too many private wells. This is more of a like southern New Hampshire, Merrimack area, but nonetheless, if anyone does have a private well and they are concerned, there are some resources through the state and information about how you can have your private well tested for PFAS. The state of New Hampshire offers a rebate program for private wells. So if you do exceed the MCLs, they do offer $5,000, I believe, as a reimbursement for treatment. And there's also money if you want to hook up to municipal water. The state has a sampling dashboard with a map, and you can really drill down and see where PFAS detections have been. And they also have a fact sheet that I listed here, what to know in New Hampshire about PFAS. Next slide. In terms of PFAS and health, if you're really worried about health effects, how to reduce your exposure, how to talk to your doctor, I love the PFAS Exchange website. That's through the PFAS REACH study, which was, Pease was part of, and Dr. Laurel Shader, who's on the call, has led up, and this is part of her organization with Silent Spring, but they have a bunch of fact sheets that are just like 1 to 2 pages, easy to digest. It talks about, anything from reduction of PFAS, effects on your health, how to test your blood, how to talk to your doctor, anything to do with health is great. And then I also included a link. New Hampshire has a state law that requires insurance companies to pay for PFAS blood testing. So if you're in a community where you've been exposed or you want to have that testing done, there is a law about insurance coverage. Next slide. And then just some other websites that I just wanted to flag for folks. So there's, the DPW puts all this, quarterly water testing is online, and they're very transparent about the levels. So if you want to go up and look and see what's been tested and what the levels are, that's great. New Hampshire has a PFAS website. The EPA, I did include a website for PFAS and lead. We talk about lead pretty frequently in this group. The Department of Defense has a website dedicated to PFAS, and I really do like the Environmental Working Group they're an NGO, a national organization. They have a lot of different resources on PFAS that I think are helpful to community members. As far as community groups, there's Testing for Pease. That's my community advocacy group. So we have a website. We also have social media. There's the Great Bay Changemakers, which Kotri leads up. I just wanted to put that out there because they've done a lot of great work about bringing awareness around water and other environmental issues. And then some links about home filtration. And lastly, the City of Portsmouth, we did have a drinking water forum in 2022. And that gave a really like nice overview of really a lot of topics in the city, the water system, different contaminants. So if anyone's interested in just trying to get like kind of a high level crash course, I recommend watching that video from May of 2022. Any questions on that? Okay, so with that, we'll open it up to, oh, Laurel, sorry, I see your hand is up.
No problem. Thanks for everything tonight, the great overview. And I just wanted to go back for a second because I was unable to comment at the moment that the discussion was happening. I think Andrea and Kim, you brought up kind of the questions and concerns about EJ and the how the material, the filter material used for the granular activated carbon goes to communities far away. And I was just curious if the Portsmouth Water District can find out any information about the process that's used to regenerate the activated carbon, like the temperatures used, and if there's any like monitoring of ambient air nearby or anything like that.
We can keep pushing. We have asked those questions and it's usually, everything's fine. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah, to the extent, I mean, you're a paying customer, so to the extent that you can, continue to try to find that information, I do think that it's really important until something like SQUO or the other destruction techniques become more common.
Have any testing techniques for testing PFAS in air? Because that's the one question, the concern is it comes out of the stacks when they're reactivating, and then how can that be monitored? And I've been told there's no real good way to monitor that. But
I mean, there are passive air samplers, which are basically certain types of plastic that you can deploy for extended amounts of time, and the PFAS from the air can partition to that and be analyzed. My colleague Reiner Lohman from University of Rhode Island and my colleague at Silent Spring, Robin Dodson, are pretty familiar with passive sampling techniques. They're not real time, but they would allow for some sense of the types of PFAS that might be in the outdoor air, and then certain chemicals, when they get into homes, accumulate and stay there over time. And we know we spend most of our time indoors. So I do think there are ways to do that type of testing.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for asking those questions. Keep asking.
All right. Any other questions from the SWAG?
If there is a disruption in the fluoride shipments and you expect it to last for any period of time, I just wonder if you want to make notice to the primary care providers in the community. They may need to, prescribe supplemental fluoride for kids during that interim period.
We would need to do a public notification to everyone anyway, and we work with the state on that. So that's important.
Okay. I'd like to open up to public comment. If anyone in the audience has any questions or comments.
Very interesting. It was really cool to see because it's like the first meeting, so I kind of understand mostly like what's happening and what our goal is for the future. So I'm really excited. I really liked it. Good. Thank you for coming.
Career day.
Yeah, no school for them tomorrow.
Shan, did you have any comments or questions?
Besides Rye, how are other towns faring with the drought situation? And is there any coordination going on between other seacoast towns?
Yeah, so Aquarion, which is Hampton and Rye and us, we've been discussing, what kind of notice should we be getting out. So we'll do a sort of concerted effort when that time comes. So the seacoast area is hit. You see the drought map, so areas north of here too, but I haven't heard from Rochester or anyone else yet. Yeah, good question. Because back in 2016, we instituted our own sort of drinking water system task force. All the surface water facilities in the area here got together and started talking about our supplies.
Wasn't there a talk at one point about doing a connection to connect to Dover so water could share? Am I remembering that correctly?
It's still in the works. We have preliminary conceptual designs for connecting to Dover from our Madbury facility.
Okay.
Making that interconnection at some point in time.
Okay.
And we do have an interconnection with Rye, so we have that. And that's more the case if a source went down from any of our systems and we needed that emergency supply. Droughts usually are wider spread, so So it's a tougher issue.
And the funding for that, is that like from the state, or would that be the city sharing that?
For the interconnection with Dover, we're doing the initial study for just the interconnection, the basic part of the study. The Seacoast Drinking Water Commission funded and the DES funded the larger study of the interconnections for the whole Seacoast area. And so this one component from the Madbury to Dover connection was one of the higher ranked interconnections from that study. So that's why we're taking the next step further, at least to get the conceptual part together. And once we have that, then we may be able to leverage funding to forward with that.
So that would be a Madbury to Dover connection.
Right. And Dover, so then Dover would also be able to run water to Portsmouth through our transmission main.
Their PFAS situation, do they have any other issues, any other sort of?
They have PFAS, but they have a treatment system on their well right now that takes out MTBE, PFAS, what else? 1,4-dioxane. And they had a heavily contaminated well, so they have a very robust treatment system in place now, which I hear is working. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, but that brings up the importance of that transmission main under Little Bay. If we're depending on that system as our interconnection with Dover, it really puts an emphasis that's our connection, connecting pipe, and that infrastructure is really important. Good. Think of things for next time,
Yeah.
please, let us know.
Please reach out, send us topics. We'll meet again in about 3 months, probably like June, but we'll be in touch with a date as the time gets closer. We do try to schedule the meetings to avoid, we have recognized a lot of people on our board or on other groups too. So we try to avoid like city council, school board, rec department, fire meetings if we can. So we'll be in touch, but yeah, probably sometime around June we'll meet again. Thanks. This concludes our meeting. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, stop recording.